Well, answers to the top questions people want to know about dealing with the IRS. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, the top IRS questions. These are the questions you should be asking. IRS expert Dan Pilla is here once a month, every month, to talk about the IRS and what you need to know. Dan, always great to have you on the program.
That's my pleasure, Bob. Thanks for having me.
You know, I thought
And
today
and and,
instead
and,
of
I- and by the way, I like the new twist with the with the Zoom approach. Makes it a little more personal.
well, it does. It makes for a better recording for sure. So that's been the upside. But now, you know, I get to see your handsome face once a month.
Are you calling me old?
No, sir, I'm not calling you old. Hey, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about a article that you wrote about Bernie Sanders. And the reason I want to bring this up, the first reason is that I appreciate that you do follow these things and alert the public to what's going on. Second thing is, it just seems like there is no checks and balances anymore, or it's just going away. You see it on both sides. You see it aggressive to where they're asking for some of the craziest things. And so one of the things I want to do is make sure that you got an opportunity to talk about one of the latest ones that Bernie Sanders has absolutely no problem with bringing to a vote. But talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, just as a way of background, Bob, we've had for years, probably even decades, the socialist advocates in for big government or bigger government have been advocating wealth taxes, right? Not just an income
Right.
tax, but a wealth tax. We want to take a portion of the wealth that you've accumulated, even after you've paid all your federal, state, and local taxes incident to the accumulation and the earning of that wealth. Now Bernie Sanders has gone a step further, and he's done something that the leftists that have been afoot in the United States for, upwards of 100 years have not had the courage to do. And he is proposing now, he's actually introduced a bill in the United States Senate. It's called the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. And what this bill would do if passed is it would literally confiscate, Bob, 50% of the stock of publicly traded AI companies, if they're publicly or privately traded, it doesn't matter, if their sales are above $200 million a year. So he would step in and nationalize half of these companies, essentially steal the wealth and the income stream, not just the taxes, Bob, but the income stream from these companies, and create a federal welfare type benefit program, not unlike the Social Security program, where benefits would be doled out to people at the discretion of Congress. And so it's not enough for these people to want to tax the wealth that's created. They want to steal the wealth itself. They want to become the owners of the businesses.
You know, take a step back to 1999 when you had the bubble stage with technology and internet stocks. You know, a little bit like where we are right now. Saw a big bear market came in, wiped a lot of them out. But then you started to build on that base, and you got some very, very powerful companies have been established out of that. Can you imagine the same thing today? Some of these AI companies, and some of the ones we see now probably won't be around, but others will be that we don't know about. But the whole point is how powerful that industry would be, and just to give the government half.
Well, and it's not a matter of giving them half. It's a matter of the government stealing half. Right?
All right,
That's
taking
what they're
it,
doing.
right.
I mean, it's just outright confiscation. But you're exactly right. You make a good point. I mean, whenever you've got entry level companies, and I don't care whether it was the automobile industry in the early part of the 20th century, if it was the computer industry in the latter part of the 20th century, all these various things that we're all familiar with these companies that come and go. They start up, they create a marketplace, they create an industry. Some companies that don't innovate fast enough go away. Other companies that have been watching, or people that have been watching on the sidelines, create new companies, and they step in and they take initiative. And all of this is the result of the entrepreneurial free market ingenuity that's found in the American spirit, right? People are ready to innovate. They're ready to create. They're ready to revolutionize and industrialize all of these various ideas that make the world a better place. And they make the world a better place by allowing the marketplace to bring these ideas to people that make their lives easier. All right, these creations, these innovations satisfy a need or satisfy a want in the marketplace. And if the marketplace doesn't want or need the idea, guess what? The company fails. But if the market wants or needs the idea, then the company succeeds. And there's no better example of that than companies like Microsoft and Apple, right? They literally created this computer world that put computers on the desks and in the hands of every single American at a time when the computer norm was the 10 or $15 million mainframe that took up half the floor of a building. And so these innovators and these creators and these visionaries created this industry. Now what happens with AI is government wants to step in and steal it because they know it's such a growing, significant portion of the market, of the technological market, and will be going forward. They just want to steal it. It's not enough for them to tax it. Right. They want to steal it.
It makes me think that this would almost have to be privately held companies. I know that they would go after publicly held, but what would end up happening is you would dilute the shares, and I mean, can you imagine what that would do to the market?
Oh yeah, it's gonna. I mean, you know this better than I do, but it would have a profoundly negative effect on the market. Right. But that's exactly what the plan would do for these publicly traded shares, publicly traded companies. They would have to make new issues of stock that would allow the government to take a position in that company that's equal to 50% of the outstanding shares, Bob. So under Sanders' plan, these companies would be 50% owned by the federal government. And then the next step of the plan is for Sanders to create this panel, right? Now imagine this now, a panel of bureaucrats, right. 7 bureaucrats nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate, that would sit in a governing position on the board of directors of all of these companies. So they would have a direct say, having 50% ownership in the company. They would have voting rights in how that company is operated. They would be able to dictate hiring and firing procedures and policies. They would be able to dictate market strategies. Anything that a board of directors can do, these appointed government bureaucrats would have that authority to do that on the board of directors of these companies. It's really a chilling idea.
I can't imagine this gaining any steam. And with all the craziness that's gone over the past year, things that have happened, you got to ask the question, I mean, is there even a slim chance that something like that would ever get through?
Well, put it this way, Bob, we have a growing membership in the House of Representatives for sure, and to a lesser extent the Senate, but it's grown in the Senate as well, of the so-called democratic socialists, right? The entire city of New York has been thrown over to democratic socialism, which is just another word for communists, right? That's all it is. They use the word democratic to give it some flowery appearance, but the fact of the matter is it's socialism. It's government control of the marketplace. It's the abolition of free markets. That's what it's all about. And so we've got a growing population in government that wants to further these policies and enact these policies. And worse than that, we've got a growing population of American citizens that believe that the ideals of socialism are better or more attractive than the ideals of the free market. My son and I did a little informal survey, and we didn't ask people questions, but we did a number of Google searches for various surveys that have been done over the years. And it looks like, Bob, that about of the citizens under 30 years of age, about 45% of those people believe that socialism is a better idea than free markets. I mean, that's almost half the people out there, and they all have the right to vote, and a lot of them do vote. that take the position that socialism is better than free markets. Precisely, Bob, because they do not understand either how free markets work and most especially they do not understand how socialism works.
Yeah, I guess that's Generation Z. Is that is that about what you can?
Yeah,
Sounds like
yeah, I don't know what letter we're up to here.
but you're right. You're 30 and under.
Yeah,
It is
yeah, yeah.
a big alarming percentage. And at some point, the generations younger than that are going to come. I mean, it's just going to build.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Unfortunately.
Mom Dami, this clown in New York, who's a self-professed socialist. I mean, he calls himself a democratic socialist, but this guy's a communist. And he talks about I think his phrase was words to the effect of the warmth of collectivism is so much more attractive than the harshness of free markets. Well, what is the warmth of collectivism? The preeminent socialist, Karl Marx, the preeminent socialist philosopher that all of these people follow, he's famous for the phrase that says, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. All right, well, let's parse that for just a second. What does it mean to say, from each according to his ability? Who gets to extract from each worker according to his ability? The state does that. All right. So you no longer have free control over your labor. Bob, labor is the essential component of every market aspect, right? You've got basically two elements of assets that work together to produce wealth. And the first element is machines, what we would call capital, tools, equipment, buildings, and so on. And the second element of that is labor. These two things, capital and labor combined, produce wealth. For the vast majority of Americans, the overwhelming majority of Americans, the capital that they own, the value of their productive component that they own is the dexterity of their hands, right? The ability to go out there and do some work of some kind, some honest work, some fulfilling work. And under this concept of from each according to his ability, that concept is the process of stealing a person's labor. No, we used to call that slavery. And
Right.
we were just appalled at the idea of slavery. And the United States continues, and rightfully so, to be appalled at the idea of slavery. A lot of people haven't gotten past the idea that the United States once sanctioned slavery. But the fact of the matter is that's what socialism is, Bob. It's slavery. It's the state taking control of the means of production through capital and labor. You no longer have a property right in your labor. The state owns it.
Well, in 24 years of doing radio, there had to be a time when there was a Karl Marx quote on my program, and today was it.
And today was it. Today was it.
All right, there, Mr. Pilla. Let's talk a little bit about IRS questions that people have. Some of the top questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's do that. But let me just say this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wrote an article about the Sanders plan, and it's available on National Review. So if you just go to nationalreview.com, put my name in the search box, Daniel Pilla in the search box, you'll come up with the most recent article on the Bernie Sanders plan to confiscate the wealth of America's AI companies. So check that out.
Yeah, is there any way on that website to put your email address in to get alerts? If a new
I imagine on National Review you certainly can. I would think so, Bob, but I don't know that for sure.
Aren't you?
You'll have to poke around on the site and see.
Yes, that's definitely good information, and how we can keep informed. And I think that is one of the biggest problems is that we're not informed as to what's going on, and kind of just let things happen. And there is clearly a downside to doing that. There's also a downside if you're dealing with the IRS and not having a good understanding of how the IRS works, because you see this every day, but the people who get fearful of dealing with the IRS, they get fearful if they get a letter that comes to them, is that they don't know the laws and the rules that are actually there to protect them from anything, as the process that the IRS goes through. One of the most probably the biggest question people ask, no surprise to you, I'm sure. I owe the IRS money. I can't pay it. What should I do?
Well, and the answer to that question, Bob, is depends on how much you owe them. If you owe less than $50,000 and you can pay within 72 months relatively painlessly, then the IRS will pretty simply set up an installment agreement. Installment agreement is a viable option for folks that owe a relatively small amount of money and can pay in a relatively quick period of time. All right. If you owe a significant amount of money and you, the viewer, define what is significant. All right. For some people, 100 grand might be significant. For some people, $15,000 might be significant. So it just depends on your situation. But if you owe a significant amount of money and you can't reasonably pay that in through an installment agreement, then you got to think about an offering compromise. An offering compromise is the IRS's flagship settlement program. This is the program that allows you to go in there and say, look, guys, I owe you 15,000 or 15 million. I don't care what the amount is. I owe this amount of money that I cannot pay. I do not have the income or the assets to be able to pay this liability in full. In that scenario, the IRS will negotiate a settlement. Now let's just take the situation where you owe 100 grand. You say, look, guys, I can't pay the 100 grand, but I can pay, let's say, $2 or $3 or $4,000, or maybe you're so destitute, your income and expenses are such that you can only pay $300 or $400. That's possible as well. And so in that scenario, you'd have the option to reduce the liability to an amount equal that you can pay as opposed to what the IRS has assessed against you. And that's the way you resolve the situation. It's called an offering compromise. There's actually 4 different types of offering compromise that depend on what your circumstances are, right? So if you don't fit in this box over here, maybe you fit in that box over there. The point is that you got to do a full evaluation of your options to see which one might work for you. And that would be an angle then to pursue to get full resolution of the situation.
So you're going down this process. At what point does the IRS, garnish wages, garnish bank accounts, anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Generally speaking, that happens when you do nothing. All right. Before the IRS can touch a nickel's worth of your assets, Bob, they have to have an assessment. That means there has to be a liability recorded on the books that you owe that you haven't paid. Now they're going to get an assessment in one of 2 ways. You either file a tax return, this is the most common, is you file a tax return without full paying the tax liability. All right, the IRS gets the return. The return says you owe 10 grand. You haven't paid the 10 grand. They make the assessment. Now they start the collection process. The less common way is through an audit or an adjustment of some kind, where you file your tax return and you pay the tax per the return, but then the IRS looks at it and says, oh, no, 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 you owe us $5,000 more. Then they have to go through the assessment process to get they have to go through what's called the deficiency process to get that assessment. All along the way, there are notices, right? And so if you're getting notices and ignoring them, then the IRS goes into very active collection mode where they send this letter, this letter, this letter, followed by a final notice of intent to levy and notice of your right to a hearing. That's the statutory final notice the IRS must send as a matter of law before they can seize a nickel's worth of your assets. They can't seize a paper clip from you, Bob, until they've issued that final notice letter. Now, this scares people, but it shouldn't. The final notice letter says this is your final notice. You must pay these taxes within 30 days. If you don't, we can enforce collection unless, and here's the important unless you file a request for what's called a collection due process hearing. When you file that request for a hearing, Bob, the case is taken out of the hands of the collection function, goes into the hands of the appeals office, and the written job description of the appeals office is to negotiate some kind of settlement with the taxpayer. Right? So they got to verify that the assessment is correct. They've got to consider collection alternatives. All right. Yes, I owe you 50 grand, but I can't pay it. And so here's an alternative installment agreement. Here's an alternative offering compromise. Here's an alternative penalty relief. There's all kinds of different collection alternatives that you as the taxpayer can propose that they have to consider. Right? And then they have to do what's called the balancing test. And the balancing test is they must make an affirmative decision that the IRS's interest in expeditious collection of the tax outweighs the taxpayer's interest in paying the tax in the least invasive manner. So you got to balance that out, and they have a responsibility to do that. So when you make a proposal for a resolution and they just brush it aside, well, guess what? That's an arbitrary decision, and we can get that reversed. So but all of this is available to you when you watch your mail and respond to your notices. When you do nothing, for example, you don't respond to that final notice letter on time or at all, they're going to start levying. they're going to hit paychecks and bank accounts. And so that happens when the taxpayer's avoiding or just simply ignoring the notices. Don't do that. Read the notices, respond to the notices. If you need help, get help.
Yeah, I think the most important takeaway from anything that you've said is that they're not going to do anything without letting you know ahead of time. And that is huge, which also begs the thought about if you move, you make sure that your address is changed at the IRS as well.
Well, and that's a good point, Bob, because people move a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the answers I get when I ask people, well, did you get this notice? Did you get that notice? And they'll say, well, I don't remember getting it, but I moved a lot. All right. So here's the thing you have to understand. When the IRS has a responsibility to mail notices to the last known address, right? The last known address is the address on the most recently filed tax return, unless you give the IRS notice of an address change. Now, when you put a forwarding order in at the post office, that's not notice to the IRS that you have a new address.
Right.
They have a form for that. It's IRS Form 8822. 8822 is the official change of address form. One of the rituals that you have to go through when you move, right? You change your utilities, you change your driver's license, you change all of these various things. Send the IRS Form 8822 so they know that you have moved.
Is it safe to say there is a form for everything?
They got a lot of forms, Bob. They like their forms.
Yes, they do.
They like their forms.
If you want more information on Dan, great website, taxhelponline.com. And he on the site, he writes, talks about the letter that comes out. Can get that out today. The letter that you publish just about every month, 10 times a year. Is that right?
Yeah, 10 times a year. It's called Pilla Talks Taxes. Yep.
And a lot of resources, a lot of free resources. So go check that out, taxhelponline.com. You also mentioned a little bit ago about the IRS audit, and always a question in the back of people's mind as they do their taxes. What triggers an IRS audit? Anything that I'm doing, does that trigger an IRS audit? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a number of things that the IRS looks at, magic formulas, let's say, that they might use to select a particular tax return for audit. But the single most common one, about 2/3 of every return selected for audit, is selected through a computer program that the IRS calls the Discriminant Income Function System. All right. And that's a sophisticated computer program that compares every line of your tax return with national and regional statistical averages for a person in your same income category and profession. If any one line of your return is out of sync with those averages, the difference is scored. It's called a diff score. And the higher the score, what that means is the further away you are from the averages in this particular area. And therefore, the more likely you are to be selected for audit, because the IRS believes that the further away you are from the averages, the more likely it is that your entry is incorrect. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that it is incorrect, because all they're doing is looking at averages, and averages is nothing more than a composite of the high and low, as you know. So a particular average means nothing compared to the facts and circumstances of an individual case, right? So all they're doing is they're just trying to, what they're doing is financial profiling. Bob, if we did that with people getting on a bus, it would be illegal. But they do it with tax returns and come on, there has to be some way to sort through them, right? You got 165 million individual tax returns that are filed every year. They can't audit every single one of them. It'd be a complete, and even if they could, it'd be a complete waste of time, because the overwhelming majority of people file tax returns correctly, I believe. At least they do their level best to file them correctly. So there has to be a way to sort through this, and they've decided that the diff program, the diff score, is the way to do that. So just because your return is selected for audit does not mean it's wrong. And this is where most people go wrong. They get that audit notice and they think, I've done something wrong. Yeah, they caught me. No, not at all. All you have to do is be prepared to prove that your return is correct. And that's the key. The burden of proof is on the taxpayer. They don't have to prove you did it wrong. You have to prove you did it right.
Great information, Dan. Once again, his website is taxhelponline.com. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. We are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.